Just don't think about $1 billion. That doesn't work. If you want to climb Mount Everest, you have to look down where your feet are, not to the top of Mount Everest, because you'll never get there. If you really want to get there, the first thing is to survive. So think about the things that will absolutely kill you and avoid those. If you avoid the things that will absolutely kill you, then your chances of surviving are high. And if your chances of surviving are high, your knowledge keeps compounding and eventually you will get there. But if you hit one of those big things, then you're dead.
Welcome, EdTech Gurus. Today we're joined by a truly exceptional guest, Mariano García-Valiño, a four-time entrepreneur, global healthcare innovator, and CEO of AXENYA, recognized by Newsweek as one of the world's best digital health companies. Mariano has built and exited companies collectively worth billions, blending technology, data science, and human-centered care to transform healthcare throughout Latin America and beyond. His work spans pharmaceuticals, digital healthcare through Latin America, population health, and AI-enabled chronic disease management. Each venture demonstrating how innovation at scale can reshape entire care ecosystems. He is also the author of a highly acclaimed book, Inedible, How to Build the Modern Tech-Enabled Healthcare Experience, where he explains why healthcare has resisted digital transformation and what it will take to finally change that. His thesis is powerful. Modern healthcare is built on an outdated model designed for acute disease, not chronic conditions. The future demands continuous, integrated, tech-enabled care. Outside of health tech, Mariano is an exceptional art photographer who works and explores entropy, time, and complexity, a rare blend of creativity and strategy that shows up in how he builds companies and then builds teams and reimagines what innovation can look like. Mariano is here today to share deep insights on scaling, AI, creativity and leadership, Latin America health innovation, and what it actually takes to build a billion-dollar company with purpose. Hey, Mariano, are you ready to be our guru today?
Oh, thank you, Tom. You've been very generous. I'm ready to chat with you. I'm not sure if I can be a guru, but we'll try it.
Well, we're excited to have you. So tell us something fun or interesting about yourself or your family so we can get to know you a little better.
We're a pretty normal family. Live in several countries. That maybe is unique. We have four different nationalities at home. My wife is Argentinian. I'm Spaniard. My eldest son is American, and the youngest son is Brazilian. And today we live between São Paulo, Punta del Este, where we are now, Argentina, and Washington D.C. So a little bit everywhere.
Family on the move. How old are the kids?
24 and 22.
Yeah. That's great. I've got a couple of adult children myself. It's nice to get them out and moving along, right?
Yeah. Well, you never get them completely out, and you don't want to either.
Yeah, that's for sure. So, Mariano, you've started and scaled and exited companies, as I mentioned, worth billions. What first pulled you into entrepreneurship, and what kept you coming back to build again and again?
Yeah. So, as always, it's a little bit of serendipity. I started my career working for the big companies. I worked for Lilly. I worked for Pfizer in New York. I worked for McKinsey in Europe. And one day, Pfizer bought a very large company called Pharmacy. It was a $60 billion deal. And they asked me to move to Brazil, basically to put the two companies together. And I landed in a very special moment for Brazil. Brazil was growing very fast. It was a decade that everything went really well for Brazil, and the entrepreneurial system started to build at that time. And I realized that I actually loved working with smaller companies that we were buying and things like that. And I felt that the other side of the table was a lot more fun than my side. And one day I took I took the plunge. I took a semi plunge. I took an offer with the Warburg Pincus, which was an investment fund, and with them I went into a company. Then we sold that company. Then I decided that was fun, and I pitched another fund for doing that. And we IPO'd that company. Then there was another fund, and then another company. I think what keeps me coming back mostly is that I'm very. This is a space with a lot of problems still, and I actually like to solve problems, both because the problems are interesting and also because they I feel that there is a huge impact in this industry that is still there unlocked, and it requires different thinking. It requires to change the way things work, and in an industry that is very regulated and very fragmented, it's very difficult to change things. So the pieces of the puzzle are very stuck. So you need to find, ways to insert. I always say that with healthcare, the first part is finding a product that actually has some clinical effect. But the second portion of that is inserting that into a place in the value chain where someone wants to pay for it, and someone recommends it, and someone uses it, which is normally three different people. And so getting that exact place is very challenging and very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I was struck by the serendipity, right? It's kind of funny in life and in business how just sometimes it's just that one conversation or meeting that one person at a conference or what have you kind of leads a pathway. Is that what you've discovered as you've worked through some of these companies?
It was my experience, at least. I believe the role that luck plays in our lives is huge. We should be a lot more humble about our accomplishments when you think about that. I mean, I'm not very. It's not a new thing. I mean, Warren Buffett says this all the time, but I think it's true. I think there is a lot of this that if I haven't had that conversation with that particular person, I wouldn't have done this and that actually unlocked some other door. And of course, you have to be prepared when the door opens and all that. I mean, it's true. You have to do a few things by yourself, but there's a lot that is chance and luck and just being open to those opportunities as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I mentioned in the introduction your book, Inedible, where you argue that healthcare is the last major industry to undergo real digital transformation. So to build on our conversation, I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts about, what's the root cause or the root reason why healthcare has remained inedible to software?
I think it's a bunch of things. I mean, it's really interesting when you probably everyone remembers the Wall Street Journal editorial by Mark Andreessen when he said software is eating the world. And if you go back a couple of paragraphs into that one, he basically says healthcare is next up for big tech transformation or something of the sort. And 15, 20 years have gone by since that, probably 15. And nothing has really happened. And I believe that there is a combination of things. One is that this, for good reasons, this is a very conservative industry. So you have to, this logic about, move fast and break things works tremendously well for some industries. You cannot do that in healthcare. Basically going fast implies that you have to go through regulations. So it's not that fast. And the problem is that if you made a mistake, you have to go all the way back to the beginning. So you better put a little bit more time into building your first MVP than in others. So that's a portion of that. I think incentives is a portion of that. The way we and we can talk about that a little bit more. Incentives were put together in the industry to deal with a problem that had a different nature. So we built healthcare to deal with infectious diseases mostly. So when you look at all the progress that modern medicine did over the 20th century, they gave us 30 years more of life expectancy. So incredibly very successful. But most of that came from vaccines and antibiotics. And most 50% of people that were dying 70 years ago, they were dying of an infectious disease. Almost no one dies of an infectious disease today, and people live 10, 20, maybe 30 years more. The combination of those two things means that the enemy that you were fighting, 70 years ago is not the same enemy that we're fighting today, and the type of diseases you have the time to develop, it's much longer, much more complex, and the incentives were done completely different. So think about, a doctor, and I could give you many examples, but think about a doctor that stays in his office and waits for the patient to call on him. That works great for an infectious disease, right? You get an infectious disease, you got symptoms, you got pain, you got fever, you will go to the doctor immediately. Now think about blood pressure, for example. You can have blood pressure for decades without having any symptom. So why would you go to the doctor? The doctor waiting for a blood pressure patient basically waits forever. Mm-hmm. So or think about the way diabetes is treated. So you go to the doctor, they discover that you have some pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes, and they give you a bunch of stuff. So all of a sudden you have to be able to measure your carbs. There's no easy way of measuring your carbs. You just have to gauge it. You have to have an incredible discipline because I'm going to eat 80 grams of carbs or 8 grams of carbs. And so I inject insulin for those 8 grams, but then I decide I want to eat a little bit more. And, the insulin is already there. The curve is already going up. So it's very, very difficult to actually get that working. And there's a bunch of things you have to get right, and so it's very easy to make mistakes in these diseases. And there's no one there that can tell you that you made a mistake. Neither your body, because you feel nothing, nor a doctor or someone that knows about it that is around. So when you look at diabetes, for example, about every $100 that you spend in diabetes, 60 are about mistakes a patient made, and drove him to the emergency room, or drove him to get retinopathy, or drove him to acquire other stages of the disease. So when you talk about 60%, and this is probably true for most of chronic diseases, 60% of expense is actually, it's not a medical problem, right? It's a problem on the way we have organized healthcare. We haven't organized healthcare for sporadic visits to the doctor, and we need healthcare that actually monitors us more frequently. So now, when you think about what you need to solve that problem, software alone doesn't cut it. So you need a specific type of hardware and software to do that. So the software that we had in 2010 was not enough. We could measure a few things remotely, but not relevant things. And even if you measure a lot of things, you collect a huge amount of data. About 40% of the data in the world comes from healthcare. So how do you deal with that? So suppose you only have I'm not sure this is true for many of us. You have your Whoop or your Apple Watch or whatever, generates a lot of data. How many doctors can actually read that? You will send them a dump of data, which is huge. They don't have the time or the ability to sift through that data and find the trends. So I think the second thing you need on top of monitoring is very powerful data analytics systems. And the only thing that is powerful enough to do that is AI. Mm-hmm. So now that you have the ability to monitor patients reasonably continuously, you have the ability to analyze that data, you can start working on this stuff. And this, just to plug a little bit of AXENYA, that's exactly what we do, right? So what we do is we monitor patients. We send patients more to the doctor. On average, we send patients 10% more to procedures, but we send them to earlier procedures. So those procedures are cheaper. So the patient stays healthy longer, and then spends less money as well. So normally we spend about 20% less of what they were spending before us. And we're only beginning. So we're getting better. We're going to get more data. I think that the world is going to more regulated, because it has to be, but more open data, things that what we saw in open finance, we are going to see in open health. So we're going to be able to do more of these things in the years that come along. But I think the that we just didn't have the right technology so far to actually deal with a problem this complex.
Yeah, and you thank you for that. And you mentioned AXENYA, right? It's really become a model for chronic disease management in Latin America, if I've got this right. So take us back to it in the sense of the core innovation behind AXENYA, and what's allowed you to scale so quickly and effectively.
I think two things, and it goes back to the logic of you have to have a product that actually does something, and you have to have a strategic positioning that allows you to monetize it. So we started with a product. We didn't know how to monetize it. We started the company basically in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, and our logic was, if we can monitor the patients remotely, and this is not something that AXENYA alone was doing. Livongo was doing that as well at that time, and many other companies. But we were doing that in Latin America probably alone, and we started with diabetes, because diabetes is the easiest, the quickest cycle of disease of all these chronic diseases. So you can understand that you're doing something for a diabetic patient in 60 days. You can only understand that you're doing something for a blood pressure patient during months or years. So diabetes allows you to learn quicker. But our logic was, we monitor patients with blood glucose monitors and bands and things like that. We uploaded that to the web. We made those data operational, and we had at the time in 2020 some algorithms that would flag patients for, we think this patient may need help, and then we send a nurse or a doctor to actually help them through phone or maybe sometimes in presence. And what we found is with this very primitive system at the time, and we published this in Diabetes Technology, one of the first or maybe the first study in Latin America on this type of things. And we were helping them getting, about 50% less risk of a stroke, 15 or 20% less risk of a heart attack, maybe 20% lower chances of diabetes, which is something that is, again, is simple to measure in diabetes, because you have very clear indicators in glucose management on doing that. And what we found is, it was very surprising for me. I thought, this is going to sell like bread, and it's very obvious. Everyone will want it. And we found out that it was very difficult to send it B2C. It was very difficult to tell the story, very complex for patients, very difficult for the awareness. And you have this thing that, most of the products that you sell B2C in healthcare, they actually care for the part of the population that takes care of them the better. It's very difficult to penetrate in the portion of the population that actually takes care of them the worst. So you normally, you make good things for the people that are already good, but you don't penetrate the segments of the population that need you the most. So we didn't really work through going through the patient direct. We tried it through the doctors, and what we found out is, I should have known that because I worked for pharmaceuticals before, but doctors are very difficult to sell to. You need huge field forces to do that, and you need, a long, and we didn't have the capital to do that. So we had to find another way. We tried through the health plans, and what we found there is that incentives in health plans, and it's the same thing in the US, are very short-sighted, because the patients don't stay with the health plans for a long time. The average in Brazil is less than 2 years. The average in the US is something like 3. And this process are biologically long, right? You treat someone for obesity today, and yes, he will spend less money, but probably beyond the window that will be your client. So the plan basically says, I don't really care that much, because you're asking me to invest money today to save money for someone else in the future. And so unless we manage to get health plans that stay with the patient for longer, it's very difficult to do that. But because the healthcare plans are normally paid by the employer, you are tied to your employer to keep your health plan. So when you change employers, and you change your health plan. So it's very difficult to change that. So what we found is that the employer is the one that actually stays with the patient the longest and with the expense the longest. So we said, there is one player here that is in the right place, which is the brokers that actually sell healthcare plans. The issue is that those brokers today, and are focused on selling healthcare plans. And healthcare plans are more expensive when your population is sicker. So their incentive is actually to get the population, not to get it sicker, but not to take care of them, because the more they spend, the more money I'm going to make. And so we said, but this is the right place to intervene, because they're touching on the two right agents, and you have the technology to deploy, because you have access to the patient base through the employer. So what we did is we actually, again, regulatory wise, you have to be a broker in order to be in that exact place of the transaction. So we became a broker. We bought a broker, and we started changing completely the way brokers work. So instead of telling people, I'm going to sell you a plan and you pay me 5% of whatever plan you decide to sell, because I'm a little bit of a supermarket for plans, we tell them, we're going to help you find the exact plan that you need based on your needs, based on our data analytics, and we will help you run that plan. And if we manage to lower your cost, then we take a portion of that. Now, when you think that about 50% of what you pay to the plan is inefficiencies, there's a lot of money to actually save from there. Mm-hmm. At this point, we are saving about 20%, but there's still space there, and there's the good thing is that it's not that difficult to sell our value proposition against very large companies, so very large brokers, because at the end of the day, the product they're buying in the back is a commodity, right? It's a plan that is someone else's. So the only thing that we're selling is, instead of paying 5% for access, just pay to us a percentage of what we are able to sell to save from your usage of that plan. And it turns out that it's more money than the 5% that they use, at least for now.
Yes, so Mariano, that's fascinating, and I want to back us up a little step here, because you've built and exited many billion-dollar companies. So for our gurus out there that are just thinking about becoming an entrepreneur or early stage entrepreneurs, help us understand what's the key to scaling a healthcare company to that level.
Well, the product has to be very big. The companies that I worked before, my first company, to be honest with you, we sold it for $9 billion, but we started with a $4.5 billion company. So we didn't get it to $1 billion. We didn't start from scratch. The other two, we did start from scratch, and our logic was more, there is no platform in Latin America for biotech. So the problem at that time was biotech was a very different model. Before the year 2000, most drugs came from very large companies that were global, and you needed a global platform to actually develop those drugs. The way we develop drugs changed just around the 2000s. You were able to develop drugs with a much smaller organization, so you didn't need a global company to do that, but you still needed a global company to commercialize that. And what happened is, most biotechs stayed around in the US and Europe, which are the largest markets, and never came down to Latin America. There was no one there in Latin America that had the footprint and the way of operations to do that. So the opportunity was huge, right? You had pretty much, you could use the pipeline of the whole world to build a pharmaceutical company in Latin America, and the only thing you had to build was the downstream model. You only have to bring the distribution and commercial. So that's what we did, and we were there first, and it was easy to get a lot of margin from those, because it was totally marginal for the biotech companies to come to Latin America. So we had a company that were 8 or 9 countries, and the only company out there. So it was basically, you went through us, or you decided not to go to Latin America. So it was easy to sell the proposition to the biotech companies at that time. So it was a good ride. So my guess is here you're gonna find in healthcare, you're gonna find that things are slower than what you plan. That it's difficult to raise money and keep your investors happy for the amount of time you need for healthcare to work. So either you get very special investors, which I've never found. And so I think that the logic is always you need to find investors that understand healthcare. But fact of life is that they can invest in healthcare or they can invest in fintech. They don't care. They just want the return. So it's up to you to give them something that they will be interested. So you have to find a way of monetizing the company in the meantime. You cannot think, this is not Uber. You cannot burn money forever because you don't know what forever is. It doesn't depend on you. It depends on a very complex market. It depends on regulations. So you have to find ways of building uh, like platforms of growth, right? You reach here, you monetize, then you reach another level and you monetize. You have to find ways of doing this in a very capital efficient way. And so I'll give you an example. The way we do it in AXENYA is because we do it with little capital because we're using the infrastructure that is already there in the market. The way we did it with the company I just described was the same. It was cheap because we had to spend zero for R&D. The R&D was there. We were using capital that was already deployed in another market, and we only just changed the market. So I think you have to find real ways of doing this very, very in a way that is not very capital intensive, and it's very difficult to do it in biotech. I wouldn't know how to. I think that if you're an incredible scientist, you can convince investors to be patient with that, and they're investors in biotech. But I think in health tech, you're not going to find those investors that much. You have to find ways of making your company profitable in the different stages of the way that you're building the company. I think that's kind of the way I see companies fail all the time with products that are incredible. They just cannot find the way to monetize it, and then it takes time, and it's difficult to keep the company alive when you do those things.
Yeah, I like that. It's especially the monetization aspect of it, right? Because that's really where the rubber meets the road, right? You can, if you can find investors to keep you going, great. But it's really getting that word out there and getting somebody to buy it, right? That's really the ultimate test.
I think so. And outside of drug development, where this is a thing that has been going for 100 years, and people understand that it's very high risk, very high returns, and it takes a long time. So you have developed investors that would actually go there. All the others are, all the other health techs or things like that. They're being invested by people that in general, they're VC, particularly in Latin America, they're just general VCs. I mean, they might have a little bit of an edge on healthcare. They might understand a little bit more, but still, they can invest in you. They can invest in the next Amazon, or they can invest in the next fintech, and those people monetize faster than you. So you have to be realistic, and you have to build a company that monetizes somewhat fast. And doing that, to do that, you have to find the space in the value chain that will pay for it. That would be, if I did it again, I think I would spend less time developing product, more time finding the right spot quicker.
Yeah, that's helpful. And you've touched on Latin America, and many of our listeners, I believe, don't really realize how innovative the Latin American digital health ecosystem has become. So, what makes Latin America a unique proving ground for health tech transformation? Can you provide us any insights there?
Well, I think it really depends on the countries. I think that Brazil is definitely like that. It's a huge country, 200 million people, so you have the market there. You don't have to go somewhere. It's difficult to go cross borders in healthcare in general because you have different regulations. The things that work in one country will not necessarily work in the other. Biology, in many cases, is different. Behavior is different. So it's very difficult to launch a world scale health tech in general. So it's important that you are in a big country. So I think the two countries that qualify in Latin America for that is Mexico or Brazil. And Brazil is about 3 times the size of Mexico in the private market in Latin America, which is the second point. The Latin America is very unequal, as you probably know, and it has a private market that is at par with the US or Europe, and a public market which is not. unfortunately, and I hope this changes. But so far, it's about a third of the population that can access the private markets, and you go to a hospital in Sao Paulo, and you will be amazed, right? It's like walking into an ambulance or something like that. But most of hospitals will not be able to pay for it. So you work with a private sector there as well. So I think that makes it easier and faster. And I think that the capital it's fairly well organized in particularly in Brazil and Mexico. It's fairly well organized, and Brazil in particular is a good proxy for the U.S. because the healthcare system works very similarly to the U.S. So if you made a product work in Brazil, chances are you can take it to the U.S., which, as you know, is 50% of the global market for healthcare anyway. So it's a good proxy there as well. So that's the other thing you can tell your investors, right? If I can make it here, I can probably try to make it in the US as well, which again, because the US is a huge country, but with different regulations in different states, not necessarily because there is a company that is working in California, they will have an operation in Florida. So you can maybe find a place somewhere else and start an operation. And so I think that overall makes Latin America a good place for developing. And as usual, you also develop in a place that where you have some advantages and personal advantage, people, things like that. There's all serendipity around it as well. But I think if you talk about Mexico and Brazil, they're very interesting places for healthcare. The other places, I think that you bump into the size of the market. Unless you can find a product that can go through 3 or 4 different countries, and then you get a size. But if you find a product that's just for Chile or just Argentina or just Peru, then you have trouble with the size of the total market.
Yeah, gotcha. That's helpful. So, Mariano, I mentioned our gurus out there, and for those of them that are dreaming of $1 billion exit in medtech or digital health, what advice would you give them today, and what are the pitfalls that you've seen that some founders, step into over and over? Can you give us some help with that?
Well, my first thing is this: you just don't think about $1 billion. That doesn't work. You have to, if you want to climb Mount Everest, you have to look down where your feet are, not to the top of the Mount Everest. You'll never get there. I think getting to those levels, there's a portion of that is the market window. When we did the IPO of a company I just mentioned, it was $1 billion company by the time we IPO'd it, and frankly, there was only a window of around 5 months over the 7-year period that we run the company where we could actually IPO the company that way. Mm-hmm. And even during that time, we were lucky because there was a period of very political uncertainty and not many IPOs were in the market at the moment, and we ended up getting by 6 or 7 times our book, so our price went up and things of that sort. But I think that if you really want to get there, the first thing is to survive. I think that I like to think a little bit here like Charlie Munger, right? So you invert it. So think about the things that will absolutely kill you and avoid those. If you avoid the things that will absolutely kill you, then your chances of surviving are high. And if your chances of surviving are high, your knowledge keeps compounding and eventually you will get there. But if you hit one of those big things, then you're dead. So be careful about your cash. Make sure that you can survive even if you cannot get your Series B or C or whatever. Find a plan B or a plan C for everything. Make sure that you treat people as partners. You will not get a good team unless you're asking a lot from someone that joins a company like these, right? So you're basically telling a guy, come here and run the risk that we may go bankrupt every month. And if you don't treat someone, and I think you find people like that, but those people want to be partners. They want to be part of the upside. And I see that a lot of times that, the people are not generous enough with that. And it's not only the money. It's about, do they have a saying in the company? I mean, or you have a genius, which that takes every decision, and they don't have a saying in those things. So you have to really be careful of building a little tribe that believes in it, and it's more egalitarian than one brilliant guy that everyone follows. That I believe that keeping that core that core team in the center through goods and bads, I think that's one of the key things.
Yeah, that's very helpful. So, Mariano, this really seems like an exciting time for you and your team at AXENYA. What's next? What does the future hold?
Well, at this point, we are focused on volume. So the moat in health tech companies often comes from data. Our company is a data company, 100% data, and our moat comes from being able to draw the best conclusions from our data. And it's like there's your algorithms where we feel we are ahead of the curve of many in Latin America, but it's also the volume, right? The amount of data that you can collect, and that's a result of how big your company is. So I think at this point we've just raised a Series A for 12 million, and we're dropping everything we have into sales. Because once you have good algorithms and high volume, then you become a company that no one can imitate. So our moment this time is actually building the moat, and the part of the moat that we have to build is volume. When that is over, then we can think about, then we will reach the next platform. So with the way we plan the company is always the platform is the time when we become cash flow positive again. We always become cash flow positive, then we cash flow negative, and then we cash flow positive again. When we become cash flow positive again, I think our next step is going to the US. But first, you have to build the volume in Brazil.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So, Mariano, first of all, I'd like to just thank and acknowledge you for being our guru today and all the insights that you brought for us. If somebody wants to learn more about you or AXENYA or even your book Inedible, how do we learn more? What's the best way to find out?
Oh, I'm at LinkedIn. My email is there. In any case, it's very easy to write. It's m@axenya.com. Just write me up. I think even my cell phone is there, so give me a call. I'm very open to those things.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, Mariano, once again, it was great to have you. Appreciate all your thoughts and insights and being our guru today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It was great.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to MedTech Gurus. I am Sylvester Harris, your MC. If you want to learn more about Tom and his consulting services, you can go to www.pctmedical.com or email Tom at tom@pctmedical.com. Now, I can be reached at Sylvester Harris, that's SylvesterHarris 5048@gmail.com, and I'd be pleased to discuss any voiceover work that you may want for your company or broadcast. Hey, thanks so much for listening, and catch us on the next episode of MedTech Gurus.